If you've been paying attention to any of the news, you'll be aware that this is the weekend in which Great Britain and the Commonwealth are celebrating the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II, honoring her long reign of 70 years. Now, as the child of British immigrants, I do have a soft spot for British royalty. So even while I feel like it's way past time for the institution to end, I still enjoy all the Union Jacks and the pomp and circumstance. And so the Jubilee celebrations have been bringing me joy this weekend, especially a short video of the Queen at age 96, having tea with a CGI Paddington Bear of the popular movies and books. Paddington offers the Queen a marmalade sandwich from his hat, but the Queen reveals that she keeps her own marmalade sandwich in her handbag for later. And the video ends with the Queen using a teaspoon and a teacup to tap the beat of "We Will Rock You" by Queen. It is ridiculous and delightful, joyful. And I will say I have not been feeling a lot of joy lately, especially after the election on Thursday when my candidate lost her seat. So the Queen having fun with Paddington is a delight. I've always had an uneasy relationship with the feelings of joy. When I feel truly joyful, there's usually a second voice in my head that worries about the price of that joy, worries about what is coming next. And it has seemed at times in my life that whenever things feel really wonderful, it is shortly followed by disaster. As if the universe prefers me to be happy, but not too happy. Researcher Brené Brown calls this foreboding joy. She says that feeling great joy is to be vulnerable. It's an opening of yourself. And so it's often that opening and vulnerability is often accompanied by a sense of fear. And that leads people to start planning for or looking for catastrophe. Many of us don't quite trust joy. And I don't think that's surprising, especially right now. Vulnerability today brings fear and catastrophe. It brings in COVID and war and racism, climate crisis, economic uncertainty right into our hearts. Hearts already exhausted by living in all of the above. And vulnerability means that openness to joy is also openness to pain. And so disaster can hit even harder in those moments. And it can feel like the universe doesn't want you to be really happy. And yet it is that very openness which helps us feel alive, that helps us come alive, feel part of the great wondrous whole that is planet Earth. Martin Buber says, "The beating heart of the universe is holy joy. Joy brings us to life." So Brené Brown says that the antidote to foreboding joy is to respond with gratitude, to move past the fear and affirm the joy by appreciating it as it arises, knowing that it is momentary. The beating heart of the universe is a holy joy. My colleague, Peggy Clark, wrote about an experience with joy as a young woman. She was at Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah, which, if you're familiar with it, has these astonishing red-orange hoodoo rock formations. It's really quite spectacular. And Clark writes, "One night, deep in the dark, we sat on the edge of the canyon talking about the world and the beauty that abounds. I didn't know what time it was, but I knew morning had to be nearby. And one of the guys we were with asked if we could be quiet for a bit. So we sat, feet hanging over the edge, in complete silence. And as we sat, the most magnificent, most glorious thing happened. The sun rose. It broke through the darkness in such a grand display of power and grace, I would not have been surprised had the rocks and trees started singing Alleluia. And we sat awestruck until we spontaneously broke out in applause, hollering and cheering in gratitude. Joy is not in the circumstance, but in the response. The sun rises every day, like it or not. Being entranced by it is a choice. Joy is not in the circumstance, but the response. And this is a spiritual truth worth holding on to. We live in difficult times. We need to take the issue seriously, to do the work that mitigates harm, that directs us towards a healthier future. Life isn't going to return to the old, comfortable, and the secure normal. It's a new, more uncertain normal now. And we can't afford to lose out on joy. We need joy to sustain our spirits, to feel that life is worth living. Now, joy may be a response, but we certainly can't just choose to feel joy. It doesn't arise on cue, but we can work to cultivate a stance of curiosity, of willing connection that will help us to be open to experiencing joy, taking us outside of ourselves, binding us to all that is. We can acknowledge the fear that we feel when we're open and vulnerable, and we can move past it, not letting us overwhelm it. Keep our focus on the moment and respond with gratitude. Staying mired in worry, constricted by duty, this injures our spirit. Sometimes we need to keep a marmalade sandwich in our bag, just in case we get hungry later. And so I encourage all of you to seek joy even in the midst of troubles, to permit yourself to choose joy, to seek joy. I was driving home and I stopped at a big intersection in Brampton that is being made much busier by all sorts of construction around it. And it was one of those heat wave days last week. So I had the air conditioner blasting, all the windows sealed. And in front of my car, a family steps out onto the crosswalk, and it's a mom pushing a stroller with a toddler and a little girl beside her. And as the mom walks briskly across, the little girl, who's maybe 6 or 7, bounces. She skips, she dances a little, she moves her hands as she bounces along beside her mom, and her feet barely touch the ground the whole way across. And it was just this moment of joy to see this girl out in the intensely hot sun, walking in this barricaded intersection across 5 lanes of traffic, and she's bouncing like Tigger. Joy is not the circumstance, but the response. It's a hard spiritual truth. For all, joy at a beautiful sunrise might be possible for even the most curmudgeonly among us. It's a hard heart indeed that doesn't soften when surrounded by beauty. But to choose joy, to find joy in the little things when you're in the midst of terrible terrain, that's a spiritual practice worth cultivating. To embrace joy, even as our bodies age and fail us, even when we live with great grief, even with all the ills of this time, racism, ableism, and all the othering oppressions. This is a power, joy is a power worth embracing. Joy nourishes our spirits, it opens our hearts, it connects us with the sustaining earth. We need joy in our lives. Not in a way that denies troubles, but in a way that says, yes, and. Yes, I'm in pain, and there is still good in my life. Black American poet Ross Gay calls this adult joy. Joy that arises even in the awareness of the complex, falling apart nature of living. Gay says, sometimes I think there's a conception of joy as meaning something like something easy, but joy has nothing to do with ease. Joy is the moments when my alienation from people, and not just people, but the whole thing, it goes away, it shrinks. Everything becomes luminous. Joy is when things become luminous, when they glow with life, when we glow with life, joy-filled. And Gay likes to use the image of mushrooms on the forest floor, all those underground connections of mycelium, as the image for how we're all connected as people. It's invisible, all those threads that connect us, but once in a while they glow and we see how we are all together. Adult joy. And this is an expression of our UU first source, that experience of mystery and wonder which renews the spirit. We're all connected and we see it in the moment our alienation falls away and we're just present, and it's wonderful. And it is possible to bring more joy into our lives, although the Rabbi Nachman warns that finding joy is the hardest of all spiritual tasks. And he also says that if the only way to make yourself happy is by doing something silly, do it. And that's why we practice laughter yoga this morning. Now, Ross Gay cultivated his sense of joy by spending a year writing the Book of Delights, in which he wrote a short essay every day about something he had experienced as delightful that day. And in the days to come, I encourage you to consider what brings you joy. Where can you find joy in your life? Can you set aside your fears and worries to embrace it with gratitude? Practices of joy might include listening to beloved music loudly. Just think of Jeremiah being a bullfrog and sing joy to the world. Other joy practices are dancing in your living room, stopping by a playground to ride on a swing, or spending time with a child. Whatever leads you to rejoice, go forth and do it. Another practice of joy can be to rejoice in the good fortune of others. We can sometimes, it's very human to get caught up in envy or jealousy about the lives of those around us. And so we can cultivate joy by rejoicing in their good fortune, whether that's good health or a special skill. And we do so by being intentional in our attitude and being grateful. After all, we're all part of this mycelium network. Their well-being enhances our own. Another way to practice joy is simply to share it. I'd say most of us are pretty good at complaining, and we've got lots to complain about. And tragedy gets all the attention in the media, rightly so. And we need good news too. So share your joy. When something brings you joy, share that story with your work colleagues or around the dinner table or during a committee meeting. And if you remembered a joy during our meditation time today, I invite you to share it over our lunch this afternoon after the service. Practice joy. Cultivate more joy in your life. Share joy. The world needs your rejoicing. So say we all.